It was September 28th, 2019, and my husband Mark and I, we stood there, literally mesmerized at what we both thought was the most perfect, most precious, most adorable little baby boy we had ever seen. All right, maybe we were a tiny bit partial. He was our first and only grandchild, and he couldn't have came at a better time. And as soon as I heard that out of all the names they could have picked, they chose Raphael. And as soon as I heard what it meant, I thought they couldn't have picked a more perfect name for our grandson. We had just found out that Mark's cancer was active, and she told us there really wasn't any great treatment options left, but she would try immunotherapy for 3 months, even though she already knew there was only about a 1% chance it would be effective with Mark's type of cancer. But she thought it was worth a shot. You see, she already knew Mark was 1%, living with the type of cancer he had past the first year. Mark was actually in his 19th year. So as soon as I heard that Raphael meant God is healed, I was so sure that this was a sign telling me that once again, Mark was going to be that 1%. But 3 months later, she told us it didn't work. She stopped the treatment immediately. I have to admit, I had a really hard time accepting this. I couldn't understand. Mark was always that 1%, and I was so sure he was going to be this time too. Now, Raphael lives near Washington, D.C., and what Mark chose to do with whatever amount of time he had left was visit with Raphael as much as he could. That wasn't too much to ask for, was it? Well, it was if 3 months later it was March 2020. You all remember what happened, right? Who wants to say it? Yeah, damn COVID. They told us we had to stay home. And what most people were worried about, when will I be able to get my hair cut next? Mark was trying to figure out a way he could still connect with Raphael. So you know what he did? He FaceTimed with a 6-month-old baby. Now, to get ready for those calls, Mark would set up his iPad, and at the bottom of it, he'd light up all these little toy cars. And as soon as our son would call, Mark would run to his iPad, he'd push the button, and there would be Raphael looking back at us with his big blue eyes like this. But as soon as he saw his pap, he got all excited, because you see, after the second call, he had already figured out what his pap was going to do. Turned out he wasn't just the most adorable baby, he was the smartest too. And pap, that was the simple name Mark chose, hoping he'd live long enough to hear Raphael say this. And what Mark did during those calls was he would pick one toy car at a time, and he would take it across the screen and go, vroom, vroom, Raphael, vroom, vroom. Raphael loved it. His little legs and arms would be flying all over the place. He'd be giggling and blowing bubbles. But what I actually liked watching during those calls was Mark's face. No, Mark wasn't blowing bubbles, but it lit up. It was pure joy. And then I started to understand. Even though Mark wasn't going to be the 1% this time, I could see that Raphael was healing Mark in other ways. Because after those calls, Mark always seemed to feel a little bit better. He was more at peace. Now, luckily, 3 months later, they lifted the restrictions and we could visit in person again. And Mark was so grateful that he was able to see Raphael turn 1. He got to see Raphael learn how to walk. The morning that the EMTs came to our house to transport Mark to the hospice center, Ryan, Rachel, and Raphael were there. And none of us knew that this was going to be Mark's last day. Before they took Mark out to the transport, Ryan carried that 18-month-old Raphael back into the room, and I noticed Raphael was tightly clutching a toy car in each little fist. Ryan leaned Raphael forward, And he said, "Say goodbye to Pap." Raphael looked. And then all of a sudden, on his own, Raphael picked one of the toy cars and he started rolling it up and down Mark's left arm as he said, "Vroom, vroom, Pap. Vroom, vroom." It was the first time Raphael ever said Pap. I looked down at Mark, and the corners of his mouth went up in a smile. Thank you.